Welcome to Constant Variables, a podcast where we take a non-technical look at building and growing digital products. I'm Michael Roth. Let's get nerdy.
This episode is sponsored by the Mahonis Group, your partner for expert iOS, Android, and Rails development. We've been working on some really cool projects lately with companies like PubPass and InSupply here in the Twin Cities, as well as some fun stuff with MarketBeat with our neighbors in South Dakota. Sign up for our monthly newsletter to learn more about what is launching next at jmg.mn/news.
Hey, Joe. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get nerdy.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to have you on here. I originally met Joe at a TechMN mini demo conference at St. Thomas, where he was doing a bit of a demonstration for the Vitals Aware application. And I think Joe's been with Vitals for about a year and a half now, maybe a little bit less. But prior to that, a plethora of digital and retail marketing experience in his past. Joe, I was doing a little bit of digging and I found that you had done a podcast on like your RV van life, which was an angle I didn't know. And that is awesome. Like picturing you guys driving out to like Las Vegas and whatever with your dog and children in tow seems quite fun.
It is definitely a sign of the times, understanding the technical non-limitations that we've been able to break through. I'm sitting in my RV right now, right outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania. So not Vegas yet, but Hershey, Pennsylvania. So the land of chocolate.
That's awesome. I love that. I actually have a Hershey bowl that was brought back as a gift from me from their little plant out in Pennsylvania there.
It's an impressive place, the world of chocolate. Not sponsored.
Dangerous spot to stop the RV, though.
Right, yeah. We actually I think we went there last weekend and had too much chocolate, which you think couldn't happen, but we're thoroughly enjoying that chocolate and then the nomadic lifestyle as well.
That's awesome. So how did your different marketing and career paths in the past lead up to your position at Vitals?
Yeah, so I was working for another tech company in the CMO role, and then some senior leadership. So that company got acquired. And then so I sort of left there and started on the marketing agency that I wanted to work with when I was a CMO. And so started the agency, very happy in that role. And then the senior leadership from that old company said, hey, we're working with Vitals. And they told me this story. And if you're unaware, I'll give you kind of the 10,000-foot overview, is that we create peace of mind during the most difficult and challenging moments for the members of society who are having difficult and challenging in moments. And so those with, disabilities and mental health challenges and sort of all across the spectrum, working with anybody, no matter their story. And so when I heard the heart of the company, and I heard that we could make a bridge from a first responder, whether fire, EMS, police, and the most vulnerable in our community, using technology, and that's never done before and has yet to happen, it really got me and said, I need to jump onto this company. I need to empower these individuals. I need to understand how they're, the whole ecosphere of our mental health system and Medicare and Medicaid and all this entire new field of individuals and what they're dealing with. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to deliver a high quality product. And for us as a team, when we see and we hear stories of, my son got pulled over, and I know something would have, from moms, those stories from moms, when like my son got pulled over, and by the end of the day, him and the cops were best friends because of the Vitals profile, when she was nervous about it before. Those only mom fears, we try to quell those every day. Thousands of them every day get quelled, and it's really fun to hear those stories. So all the other hurdles and all the other difficulties really go away when we get an email from a mom or a self-advocate that says, hey, I haven't gone to this place because I was nervous that something, my anxiety or me being deaf would cause a difficulty in an interaction. Giving people freedom and helping moms sleep better is the reason we do what we do.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. And honestly, one of the reasons the presentation stuck out at the mini demo among the others that it was, there's such a overarching purpose behind it to the greater of society rather than just the profits or the benefits of the stakeholders directly related.
For sure.
It's super, super easy to get behind. So I can see the draw there for the career too.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, working with individuals, and we work with, we've been very blessed to be partnering with a lot of these organizations that are trusted most in the community. And so to work with them and then for them to put their seal of approval on what we're doing is a lot of fun. And for them to embrace technology, it's sort of a couple years behind the rest of the world, but it's exciting to see them say, wow, now we can empower our members. And this was created, I think I mentioned that in the presentation, this was created alongside the Autism Society of Minnesota to ensure that we're creating a technology that aligns very well with their audience on what they need, what they want, level of data security, because we're dealing with very intimate information. And so it's really fun when all those stakeholders can sit in a room together and create community.
Definitely. And to kind of go into further detail from my understanding on the Vitals app, and you can expand upon or correct whatever you need to, the application is meant mainly for a vulnerable type individual, whether they're being fully independent or they've got a caregiver taken over care for them, that they would be able to have some sort of device on them that when an emergency situation arises, that first responder coming up would be able to get an immediate source of information on that person and the best way to interact and de-escalate the situation with them before they even make that first contact.
Exactly, yes. So the vulnerable individual has a Bluetooth beacon on them, and then the police, fire, EMS, first responder has a special app that only they can download using their official department email address and computer, and app and phone. And then so during that interaction within 80 feet, it pings on the first responder's phone. And so if that first responder is, maybe pulled you over and it pulls up, they're able to review that information during that moment and then make appropriate actions to de-escalate a situation. If it makes sense, call in your caregiver. And one of our biggest reasons we're seeing now is medication, allergens and medication for EMS. So if you pass out, somebody calls the ambulance for you. They're not able to understand, your unique medical situation. And even with a medical ID, it's kind of this real-time digital medical ID. So you're now be able to communicate that instantly and saying, I'm allergic to this, this, and this, but this works really well. Or I have insulin on me, or I'm allergic to bee stings and I have that in my backpack. Information that a little wristband around your wrist has no possibility. We can embed videos in the apps, which really humanizes the interaction, especially those who are on the autistic spectrum. And one of our largest communities now is individuals with PTSD. To them to be able to communicate to an officer about who they are, potentially their service history, and if they have any difficulties with, loud noises, which are very common in an emergency situation, but you have no idea that that person is, escalated by loud noises because of a traumatic situation they did, fighting overseas.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And that seems like a fairly clear perspective on how the first responder would interact with the app. if you were the caregiver or maybe a self-advocate individual trying to get some of your conditions or medications into the application, what's the interaction look like? Is it pretty straightforward? You create an account, enter information, that's it? Or I guess beyond video, like you were mentioning, is there anything else they can do?
Yeah, it's sort of like a dating profile in that ease of use. So it's all open. So if your conditions aren't pre-populated, you can add your condition in there. There is no medical verification. So everybody always asks about the HIPAA thing. We're not taking your medical records. We're not embedding it into your medical records. So any information that's relevant or could be relevant, and we guide you along that process as well of like how to phrase things and to write in a way that is, actionable. And there's some people that will use it, they'll update it daily, especially for caregivers, that they'll update it daily depending on the mood or the interaction or the personality of the person under their care. And they'll just go into the app, update it, hit save. And if an interaction happens, seconds after they hit save, it would automatically be in that profile. And so, yeah, it's a very simple process, sort of a simpler online dating profile. And then all the videos or images, if you have them, you could certainly upload them or create them along the way. We really like the videos for individuals with personality disorders. Any type of those personalities or difficulties there that maybe they're not, in those stressful situations, they'd have a difficulty being their unstressed self.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in general, for conveying any sort of idea, photo is worth 1,000 words. A video's a whole lot of photos together. So that's just a lot of information and personality that you can get across in a short amount of time.
Very much so.
So I know you've only been with Vitals for about a year and a half, but do you have any idea the origin story, the trigger point, or what kind of initiated the action on this need?
Certainly. So this has been told through other people, but the story that I've heard and the one that we love to tell is that there's a St. Paul police officer, and he has two sons. Two larger sons who are on the autism spectrum. And he personally understands how to interact with them, but he knew that during high stress, high anxiety moments, they had a tendency to be non-responsive, to be violent. And so this is something that got him worried as a father. So what he first did is he printed out a card with their name on it and a photo on it and who they were and showed it to all the officers in his precinct. So in St. Paul, there's probably a couple hundred officers. So he was going from desk to desk to desk, to shift to shift to shift to say, hey guys, these are my sons. My name's on the back. If you interact with them, please remember this name, remember who they are. They're wonderful kids and they just need some help in those moments. There's a lot of brain studies talking about anxiety and stress and what happens to individuals who are neurotypical. And so he just got confused and nervous and worried as a father. And so he tried to do as best he can. And then he realized, I'm not the only one out there. He would go to other officers and they're like, hey, can you hand out mine? And by the time he has 50 stacks of, 20 stacks of names, that's not very practical.
Right.
And unfortunately, that is sort of that system, and I loved your chuckle on it, that is the current system outside of departments that don't use Vitals. Typically, a mom or dad will go to their precinct. Their police officers is what they go to first, given the armed nature of police departments. And they'll fill out a form. It is the saddest thing to see as a parent. They fill out a form, and that form is filed.
They've got a form for it that the police department provides.
100%, yeah. So that's the current system. So they'll go to the police station and be like, "This is Bill. Oh yeah, sure." Fill out this form, all the information there, and then that is filed. So in an incident, they could say, "Well, that your son is deaf, and I didn't tell him to get on the ground, okay, we'll drop the non-compliance charge. That's
Okay.
sort of the reaction to it now. That's sort of the usage of it now is, well, we'll pull the records post-interaction and then potentially adjust what occurred for obvious reasons. So it's unfortunately, that's the status quo. And so, the creators of it went to some technologists and said, how can we do this? And so they low energy Bluetooth, I think was just emerging during this time period. And so that was the technology they lifted on. It said, perfect. If we put beacons in the hands of all these kids and families and friends and individuals who are vulnerable, then we can have a unique code embedded in that Bluetooth that will only be able to picked up by this app and only within proximity, because obviously Bluetooth is within proximity. One of the values of it. Anyone with a Bluetooth speaker, if you walk away, it doesn't work anymore.
Right. Yeah, you get the drops and it's gone.
Exactly. And so instead of having open Bluetooth like your speaker, very closed off network, and then there's no actual information on this Bluetooth beacon. All it is the key that you need the lock, which is the first responder's phone, to unlock. And so now those 20 or so, 50 or so things that the founder had of all those things, now we can have thousands of individuals, hundreds of kids, hundreds of family members within a society. And then now that information is real time, in the moment, while they're walking up to the car, they can say, oh, this is Bill. Oh, Bill lives right down the street, and Bill has autism, and multi-phase directions, like, put your hands on the steering wheel and give me your driver's license, are impossible for Bill. So I'll pause in between. Like that one little pause, multi-step directions for certain individuals are impossible. Like, as much as is an officer telling, like, go fly. I can't, officer. It's the same thing in these instances, and the officer would have no idea. So what officer would see as non-compliance, he would ask again, potentially shine the flashlight in, escalate the situation. And so now the technology is there, embedded, and then the more people that are on it, the more robust it is, and more robust it becomes. And we're in the Minneapolis airport, and 50 plus departments right now, and thousands more joining that say, hey, I want this information in this moment to ensure the best possible outcome and peace of mind.
Right. And it is amazing to hear, because in the time that I've known about Vitals, I had not heard that origin story yet. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the departments do have a process and a form and at least somewhat of a recognition of this need, even if it's not quite as early in the process as it should be, is just stunning that there hasn't been any progress made on it until it's been done privately.
For sure.
And
yeah.
I hope it makes a great talking point for you to be able to introduce two different partnerships and departments.
For sure. And departments know and understand it. There's a lot of legacy when you're dealing with public service from a technology perspective. So, speaking real on creating and talking tech, it's just sometimes the best product, takes a while for adoption because you're dealing with legacy institutions, and you're also dealing with education, and we're also working with training organizations to work with police officers on how to interact with individuals, with vulnerable individuals as well. So sort of a re-education as well. So it's not just the technology, it's not just the information, it's also training as well that we believe in, that needs to be updated and modernized to some of these interactions.
Absolutely. So I know that you mentioned the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, and that is a somewhat recent partnership within the last couple of months that you guys have at least announced publicly. Mm-hmm. What did the partnership with the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport mean for the Vitals app as an organization? And do you guys have any others that you're kind of actively seeking out right now?
Yeah, we have a lot on the horizon. And so I think for us, the Minneapolis airport and working with the police and working with the Minneapolis Airport Commission really solidified the usage of this outside of typical first responders. I think when Vitals first came out, given our origin in the police departments, it was like just in your local police area. But I think that working with the Minneapolis Airport Police is saying that this is a massive need for travelers who are coming in your community, and maybe they don't speak the same language. So you could put the language on there, and you could put notes on like your different language for individuals. So having your individual who's visiting from out of state or even out of country have this. So it really expands the usage of this beyond like your, just your hometown community, and really talks to the value of having a community. People aren't just in their city, especially nowadays. They're traveling to another city and going to the airport, and nobody knows when an emergency is going to happen. So it really told us as a team that we need a network of this for our current customers and to support additional users to this. Is like, it's awesome that we're saturated in the Minneapolis area, and we're starting in Florida and Colorado and Texas and California. But the bigger we are, the better protection we can give, sort of like a cell phone coverage. Like, it's awesome if it works in your house, but that's not where you're at. And we consider ourselves sort of this coverage network. So it was exciting to partner with them and to see more people using it, and to be this source of reassurance and truth.
Yeah, that is very exciting, and honestly an angle as an outsider that I didn't even see as a pivot, because it was mostly my introduction to it when you guys were partnering with the St. Paul Airport, or Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. And it's cool that that was kind of an opening of the lens, and you guys probably saw it significantly before it was announced, but just in the lens of what the proven use case was for Vitals, that it could kind of take another step beyond just that initial iteration, and will hopefully continue to do so.
Certainly, yeah. And we're in one of our earlier launches was in Branson, which is a big destination, vacation destination, here in the Midwest, and working with additional opportunities like that. We did a pilot program within Minneapolis schools. Potentially, we'll repeat that for next year. And so the caregiver first responder relationship can be adjusted with community understanding. So this could be within a school, within a hospital. We consider the first responder, out in society is pretty well defined, but within a subsect of a population, that first responder could be a teacher. It could be hospital staff. There's a whole other, obviously in any tech product, maybe not obviously, but in all tech products that I've always been a part of, there's always about 1,000 applications, which is a good and a bad thing.
Yeah.
So amazing opportunities and understanding bandwidth and the financial costs to exploring all of those different areas. But it is exciting when they approach us, or when we approach somebody and they're like, yeah, let's do it. That technology works perfectly here for us.
That's a very responsible way to take the look at it, especially when it's such a useful service. I don't want to see it go down the drain.
Quite, yeah. You can't serve all people right away.
Exactly. So I know when we were talking, you said that one of the kind of gold mines for your company is when there's a community individual or family or group around a school, anything like that want to get together, go to their police department and give testimony on why they think Vitals would be useful. Are there any other kind of partnerships that you guys are seeking right now that you're kind of driving towards that you'd want to talk about?
Certainly. So case managers, those would be a huge area of like, if you know a case manager, if you work with a case manager, we are through the state of Minnesota. We're actually voucher certified. And if you're not familiar with that, basically means that the state of Minnesota says that we believe in the value of vitals so much that we're going to cover this within their waiver billable for individuals on low income or lower income. And not to get too political into this, but a lot of individuals who have individuals with mental health challenges or medical challenges, there are a lot of them qualify for Medicare or Medicaid because the cost of the constant need for care and medication and is exorbitant.
Right.
So that would be a big thing. Anybody is within that network, case managers or advocacy groups, we're always looking to discuss and present vitals as a value add to their community. If you're, I work with this nonprofit and we work with individuals with, PTSD or deaf or blind or dementia or mental health or food allergies or epilepsy. Sort of anybody that we consider the vulnerable individual is that, like, in that moment, if it's not obvious to the naked eye, and even we have individuals who are in wheelchairs that love vitals because they see the wheelchair, but then they know that, like, hey, my left hand doesn't work as well. Like, you don't know that walking up to me, my hand's in my lap. How are you supposed to know that, this finger doesn't work or this doesn't work?
Or maybe you blew a rotator cuff and you can't get your right arm behind your back.
Exactly, yeah. So the word vulnerable individuals, I have it for myself. I'm talking about, anxiety or difficulties or, allergies in those moments that you don't know if you're going to be able to properly communicate that.
Right.
In the moment, it's a huge peace of mind during an interaction with a first responder for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the more recent partnerships I was seeing with you guys, and it might be a little more technical focused, but it was NextNav, and it seemed to be something to do with that Bluetooth, I think, integration. It can somehow tell vertically where a person would be in a building. Do you know anything about that? Is that accurate?
Very much so, yeah. So you're able to get floor level location data indoors and in urban environments. So one of our more robust partnerships is with a company called the Rapid SOS. And so their service allows for enhanced data to be delivered to 911 operators during a 911 call. So if you call 911 on your cell phone, all of these technologies, if you have a vitals profile, your vitals screen will show up. If your app has geolocation integrated into it, NextNav is able to take that and integrate it into the Rapid SOS portal. So now, let's say you're calling from a big city, New York, and you're like, I'm at this building. I think I'm at floor 12. Oh, actually, you're at floor 13. You didn't realize that the first floor was not on the elevator. Now the officers actually know where you're at. So it geocorrelates in that urban environment, and then our data is added into the feed. So there's sort of this call feed that comes in. It's just one feed, sort of the old-fashioned 911. What I thought before getting into this space, what 911 calls were. I called, that's all they knew. But now with smartphones and all that embedded technology, now they're able to layer on additional data. NextNav is one of those, and so we partner with them to ensure that when our data comes into Rapid SOS, their data is on top of that. So now they know where you're at, potentially your mental health challenges or your some of your difficulties, and they're able to send the right people from 911. Because if you call and you're like, I can't breathe, they might just send a cop.
Right.
But if you call and I can't breathe, and it says, you have an allergy to something that's prevalent in the area, they're sending an EMS instantly.
Absolutely.
or they might even set a medevac or a helicopter given the location of where you are in that building. And so all this information allows first responders and those dispatchers working at 911 centers all across the country the best opportunities to provide, real-time service. When seconds matter, the most information is going to have the best outcome.
Absolutely. And I know there's some people who aren't necessarily in high-rise buildings a lot that might not see that need, but your point was very insightful to whether it might need to be a medevac from the top of the building, because there was a statistic I was reading, and I'm not going to recall it down to the number, but there was a certain floor level where if you were above maybe the 24th or 32nd floor in a high-rise building, your chances of surviving a heart attack drop down to virtually zero, because the time it takes to go up and down the elevators with the medical staff is simply too long for the response time.
Yep.
Which it was something around working in an office, working in high rises, but even in something as simple as that, where that really opens up a vulnerable person to being someone with even a higher risk for heart disease, which is a huge percentage of the U.S. population.
100%. Yep. So understanding, they call up and it says, high risk for heart disease. Oh, cool. Let's make sure the right equipment shows up. Because if the first responder shows up, police officer shows up and they don't have that equipment on them, that's another 3 or 5 minutes that that potentially you don't have in those moments. And so we feel like the best information at the best time will deliver the best overall results for everybody, and everybody included, from the 911 operator who picks up the phone to your loved ones to yourself. There's a whole, if that information is not provided, those 911 operators are incredible and amazing. If you are one or listening to this or know one, please give them a big hug. I've met a lot of them and they're amazing. But they can only do with what information shows up on the screen. And if it's blank, they have to do a lot in a very short amount of time to ensure that the best outcome happens for all parties included.
The other thing I love about Vitals is it takes away that game of telephone, because even if the operator has all of the information on file right in front of them, the responding officer or EMS personnel able to look at it immediately and read through and watch a video and see that all without having to listen to a fuzzy radio transmission or listen over the sirens and the traffic of the highway or something like that just seems valuable.
Yeah, and so that works both ways. So if you have a Vitals profile and you call 911, that information is on the screen for them to see. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's our integration with 911. So if you have a Vitals profile, and if you're a caregiver as well, your number shows up as theirs, and so there's two profiles that they can click on: your profile or the one under your care. And 911 is incredible at ignoring information if it doesn't matter. If you're calling on your neighbor, they don't need to look at your information. And so they won't. They'll just click on and say, there's, the house is on fire next to you. Your medical information is irrelevant in that moment. And then our information disappears from their system as well after 12 hours. So that's, you call 911 today, you have a Vitals profile, your information is shown up on the screen. And so a lot of the times, the individual call and they're not able to in the moment articulate their difficulties or their challenges or remember the 6 things that they're allergic to in the moment in a stressful situation. It's kind of like, your house is on fire, start to juggle.
Yeah, I go into the doctor's office on a normal visit and I don't remember what I'm allergic to. That's never in your mind, which I should, and I have a mild allergy, but still.
Exactly. I know my wife is allergic to something and she always mentions it when we're at a doctor's appointment together and I need to write it down. But if she's not there, she's not conscious or able to think clearly in those moments, which a lot of anybody who's ever gone through stress or a difficult emergency, which I'm assuming we all have, think back to how your brain was operating in that moment and try to tell somebody in a calm voice how not to make you upset.
Yeah, exactly.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah, and personal experiences and scientific evidence all support that, where stress levels go up and IQ and memory recollection and all of that significantly drop because your brain's focused on that red alert moment.
Exactly. And then we can come in there and provide that sort of calming peace of mind. And the interesting part about it, which I always find very, very exciting, is that what we're asking our first responders to do in the moment is heroic just in the very nature of them showing up to the most difficult things we're all experiencing. But imagine being asked at 60 feet to diagnose somebody that a trained psychologist or a trained therapist couldn't do, it took months to do. And now you're being asked at 60 feet to diagnose and respond appropriately to hundreds of unique individuals every day. And unfortunately, we've seen very negative results of that. When the guessing game goes wrong, and we're trying to allow for that communication to happen. I mean, the one thing is like putting putting the hand on the shoulder to initiate trust. There's a large percentage of the population that don't want that. And if you're able to communicate that in the vitals profile, we have a story on our YouTube channel about this girl, Caitlin, on the autism spectrum, and she's self-identified. We're not calling her out, and all the information is very secure. But she was driving home one day, and she's a younger girl, and there was some road construction. So she stopped at the road construction, but she couldn't remember how to go around it. She always took the same route every day. So she had some freedom. And an officer from a different department, a younger officer, training officer, came up to her, and it appeared for Caitlin's actions that she was a young kid who was intoxicated. He was about to pull her out of the car, do a field sobriety test. An officer from a different department came up with the Vitals app. Caitlin had the Vitals beacon on her, looked at the information, was able to recognize her condition, note the signs of like looking away and being anxious weren't, I'm a young kid who had a couple too many beers and now I'm worried I'm going to go to jail. They were this neurological response to a very stressful situation, and they appeared exactly the same. Like, you couldn't tell the difference on the surface because you couldn't tell the difference.
Right. And think how many steps are then involved with the field sobriety test that would have followed too. It just would have spiraled. Exactly.
And so they're like, called Caitlin's parents, because you can put your caregivers right there. Called Caitlin's parents. Parents was able to talk to Caitlin and say, hey, turn around. The officer's going to walk you over where you need to go. You can head right home. And it was like this simple moment for both parties. But without that, the normal operating procedure of the first responder would have, field sobriety test, would have done potentially done a tox screening, would have done all these things that are obvious, but not specific and the right action for Caitlin. And there's no way a first responder can be better than a board certified, a board certified psychologist.
Especially it goes down to departmental training too. Like they might get anywhere from 10 hours, if they're lucky, 40 hours of training on something like this. And to your point, it's something that people get board certified in and spend months with a single individual to learn it all about.
Exactly. And we have, there are programs now in where psychologists and individuals are going to co-responders, they refer to them as. And the co-responders absolutely love Vitals, because now maybe there's 2 co-responders per department for many reasons. But now they can have 40 co-responders, because they can call up and say, hey, Judy, you're the psychologist. The Vitals profile says this person is, high anxiety. What do I do? How do I talk? What's my tone? And so they can individualize the training per interaction.
Got it. That's super cool. So let's talk a little bit about what the team at Vitals is looking like today. I know the company's around 5 years old. How many people do you guys have on the board, and what types of roles make up the rest of your team?
Certainly. So we have our fearless leader, Janae Harto. She's the former CEO. She's the current CEO. She is the former chief of police at the city of Minneapolis. We also have, I'm pulling up our team right here, so I make sure I get everyone's current role right. Chief Technology Officer, to ensure that all of our integrations and our app is working, and our integration with Amazon Web Services and all of that tech background is in place. Chief of Communications, to really be the leader in working with our advocacy groups, to ensure that we're communicating with them, to ensure that they're communicating with us and updating them, and really understanding how we can work together on there. I'm the chief marketing officer, so my role is, relatively clear, but very, very muddied every day to ensure
Right.
that, to ensure that the overall brand experience and our integrations and everything aligns with the brand. And then we have two sales team. We can refer them as public safety managers or strategic partner directors that are saying, how can we find additional first responders, additional cities, additional municipalities, additional grants and funding to ensure that we can get this in the hands of as many people as possible. So it's sort of the leadership, the tech, the communication, the marketing, and then the sales.
So that's around 7 people in total, making up the Vitals team, if I was counting correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But in your position as CMO, how much of what you learn ends up contributing to the app and technical updates, if any? Because I would have to imagine going out and talking with new potential partners might bring in new ideas. So
Mm-hmm.
do you interact with the technical team fairly often, if at all?
Certainly. So the first area in any CMO role or chief marketing role is to ensure that the customer experience is tier one. To ensure that those any big or small technical difficulties that our customer experience in the signing up or maintaining their account is prioritized to a technology team. A lot of times technology teams, and I mean this with no disrespect, really love the idea of new.
Yeah.
And as a marketer, if we don't have a product that performs as well or better than the average customer experience, you're dead in the water no matter what your value proposition is. And unfortunately, our user experience baseline is now the new standard for technology products, because you're in these apps so many times a day, hours and hours and hours and hours. And if you download an unknown product that you hear from a good recommendation and it doesn't give you just an average technical experience, it doesn't matter how good the marketing is, how good our partnerships are, how good value add, you're going to have a really difficult time at scaling the product. So that would say from a marketing role is first, working with our customer care team, working with our agencies that we're hiring from an onboarding perspective to get more people on board to ensure that the average minimal technical in all areas is being maintained. And then secondly, you're right. We'll talk to a partner or we'll talk to somebody and they'll say, hey, can your app do this and this and this and this and this and this and this? A lot of ideas. And so it's my job to filter those ideas and present them in phases or stages or sprints to our technology team. I'm not just forwarding the idea to them and say, you deal with this. I'll typically collect a series of them. And it really depends on the urgency or if it comes from the sales team or if somebody wants to technically fund this, we'll have departments and say, hey, we want to give away 1,000 signups to our community. Okay, how can I work with the tech team? Because that's a funded program versus a really good idea. So we're filtering those and then presenting those and then understanding at a tech company a bandwidth and the cost associated with developer hours, and balancing those out, because not every good idea needs to be implemented if it doesn't have dramatic impact at the bottom line when you're a couple of years in. You can't just, hey, those are all really good ideas, let's do those. Somebody eventually has to keep the lights on in a very practical sense. So as a marketing officer, it's like, oh, that's awesome, that's a good idea, let's filter that. Oh, cool, we're going to release a new version in 6 months, let's include that in there. Tier one, it's always the user experience to ensure absolutely that you're not just building a leaky bucket, which I've worked with and consulted a lot of tech companies in the past, or sometimes they'll have a leaky bucket and they're wondering why they're not scaling. Like, oh my gosh, we got featured in this amazing article, but we're losing 12% of our customers every month. Like, well, that's why.
Yeah, you're only as strong as the weakest feature there, because someone gets into one little corner of your app that doesn't work, and it's always those negative experiences that stick in people's minds, even subconsciously, and that's what's always going to get shared. So it's nice that there's a focus to balance those new ideas, and your role is much more than just collecting information from your strategic partners reaching out and any potential leadership roles coming to you with suggestions. It's organizing and prioritizing what's going to be most valuable for the dev team, it sounds like.
Yep. Understanding, like, this is important because it's going to affect 20% of our audience. This is important because it's funded. This is important because it opens up a potential partnership. And then I think obviously managing a good idea with something that's in contract. I think those Definitely. Are balancing those out. And it's tough. When you work in tech and you're geeky and somebody presents a really cool idea to you, you kind of want to just do it, but you need to be a responsible leader in your company and say, love the idea for Q3.
let's figure out when and why and how.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's difficult. And especially when you're the buzzkill, and I'm a buzzkill in, a lot of conversations. I'm like, we should do that. That would be so awesome. I go, yeah, that's awesome. Let's present a business case. Let's look at the P&L. Let's look at the value add. There's a lot of, really cool tech products that could have done massive things and they don't. So sometimes restraint is the best strategy in regards to new development of technology.
Well, in initial conversations, you definitely don't come off as the buzzkill of the company. That's for sure.
For sure, it is not a role. I love the brainstorming and the execution side, and I love the creative nature of technology, because you're dealing with this blank canvas and you're defining the future, which is amazing. But at the end of the day, we have to serve our clients and serve our customers. And especially when you haven't reached capacity within your client acquisition, like, hey guys, there's 90% more of the market that wants this basic service. Let's serve them before we get distracted, and updating it for the 1% that's excited about the new things. That adoption curve, I think we're all familiar with, of those, a lot of people develop for the early adopters. Those 12.5% or 6% or something, that early adopter crowd, we're developing for them, but there's 50% of the audience that hasn't even downloaded our app yet. Let's spend our dollars to get them on the app versus trying to new update for 2.5% of the population. So
that's such a great reminder to focus on. In the next couple of years, maybe just the next year, are there any major goals that you guys have for the app coming up?
For us, it's growth at this point. So we want to double our number of active responders. We want to continuously re-educate or educate first responders on dealing with vulnerable audiences. So rolling out a national program for that as well. And then we would love to be integrated with a third-party partner. We have a couple of conversations in the technology space, in the wearable space, and where we could be integrated into current wearable technology where we could reach millions of consumers in a very short amount of time. So that's the stretch goal for the next year, is that our technology is integrated into current wearable tech, and now we're able to connect millions of consumers with first responders and 911 operators in their area.
Well, that's very exciting. And would that be with wearable technology that's already out in people's hands, and you guys would be able to potentially work with them in software updates to make them functional with vitals?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to cut it. That certainly would be one.
Sure.
Or partnering with a developer or creator, creating our own as well. So kind of a couple different pathways there, but being able to add that as a service to your wearable tech. You already have it. The Bluetooth is already there, and it's a form factor that people are already used to versus our Bluetooth beacon, which is, it's like a key fob, which is awesome. You can put it on your key, but if you're already understanding the value of real-time information, if you think about your wearable phone, your smartphone, your wearable smartwatches, they're real-time information that are benefiting your life. And so if we can just add the layer of like emergency benefits, then it's an easier consumer acquisition journey.
Totally. That's very cool to see. So for anyone wanting to learn more or connect with you about this episode or anything Vitals does, what would be the best place to send them, and where can people download your guys' app?
Certainly. So for me, you can email me, joe@thevitalsapp.com. You can look for me on LinkedIn, just Joe Meyers, Meyers. And you can download the Vitals app on iOS and Android. Just search for thevitalsapp.com. The Vitals app, excuse me. Or you can head to our website, thevitalsapp.com, and click download the app. And it sends you directly to your app store of choice that's on your phone, which is one of my favorite tech things or geeky things, is that it'll send it to exactly where you need to download it. So go on your mobile device, thevitalsapp.com, click download the app, and it'll send you exactly where you need to be.
Perfect. Well, this hour flew by for me. Joe, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to go over?
I would say that my final thought is take care of those vulnerable individuals in your own lives. Realizing and working for this company, I did not understand the daily challenges that individuals who are vulnerable go through. So take care. Maybe text somebody in your life that may be going through a health challenge or a mental health struggle or another difficulty that today. Just say thinking about you. If you need anything, I'm here. That would be my final takeaway, is take care of those who are most vulnerable in your world, and hopefully we can take care of the most vulnerable in our society.
Awesome. Well, great message from Vitals and a great message from you. Very enjoyable. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks to Joe Meyers for joining the podcast today. You can find direct links for connecting with Joe and downloading the Vitals app by visiting our show notes found at constantvariables.co. You can get in touch with any of us here at Constant Variables, our host, Michael Roth, our producer, yours truly, or our editor, Jordan Doust, by sending an email to hello@constantvariables.co. Maybe you have some feedback for us or a guest suggestion. We would love to hear from you. You can also find us on Twitter at CV_podcast. Today's episode was produced by Jenny Kurkowski and edited by the victorious Jordan Doust. This episode was brought to you by the Jed Mahonis Group. Check us out at jmg.mn and sign up for our monthly newsletter at jmg.mn/news.